Monday night gave us the long-awaited finale to Better Call Saul, the sequel series to Breaking Bad, one of the most critically acclaimed and successful shows of all time. Now, following up a show that many consider to be possibly the greatest show of all time is a tall order. And doing so as a prequel is even harder because, as we know from the Star Wars prequel trilogy, prequels tend to turn out not so great. Typically, exploring backstory ends up not being that interesting because it destroys the mystery of everything surrounding the story that we already love. And so prequels are typically not high on my priority list, but I gave Better Call Saul a chance back when it first debuted a few years ago, and here we are 6 seasons later. The show is wrapped up, and I can honestly and truthfully say that Better Call Saul is fantastic start to finish, and I loved it. I thought the finale was wonderful, and I thought the entire show was wonderful. I thought it was at the very least on a comparable level to Breaking Bad, quality-wise. I'm not going to say which show was better because I think I need to rewatch both shows to really make that determination. Oh no, the horror. I've got to watch two of what are now two of my favorite shows ever. And, and it's been reported that this is likely to be the end of the Breaking Bad universe. There was also the film El Camino, which is not terrible, but somewhat pointless. I think the reason El Camino didn't work for me, it's the same reason why some of the Marvel shows don't work for me. Like, at the end of Breaking Bad, we kind of know what Jesse's fate is going to be, and then this movie just reinforces kind of what we already knew about how Jesse was going to turn out. It's just an hour and a half to get to a point that we all kind of figured was going to be the case. And Marvel does that as well. Like, end of Endgame, it's like, oh, Falcon's going to become the new Cap, and then they have to do an entire show to reinforce how Falcon became Cap, even though we all kind of figured out that he was going to be Cap because they gave him the shield at the end. But whatever. Anyway, that's my point. El Camino, not terrible, but largely pointless. But Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, absolutely fantastic shows, and I love them. And Better Call Saul is interesting because it's the way it plays out. It's a prequel and a sequel to Breaking Bad. It actually kind of works in filling in the gaps left behind by the previous show. And actually, one thing I would like to see for those of you who are more inclined for fan edits and things like that, people more talented than me, I would like to see like a supercut of both shows. And, whatever, let's throw El Camino in there too. All the events of the Breaking Bad universe played chronologically. Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, and El Camino, and then all the scenes where it jumps back and forth in the timeline, you can kind of put them all in order sequentially. I think that would be really interesting to see, something like that. And I wouldn't mind experiencing both shows in their entirety again. So to do it in a new way would be pretty cool. But here I'm going to talk about my general feelings on the overall show of Better Call Saul and why I loved it so much. I'm going to be as spoiler-free as possible, including the finale, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. I've already talked to people who have come up to me and said, hey, is this show really good? And I was like, yeah. And it's like, well, what happens in it? It's like, go watch it. Go watch it. I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm going to be as spoiler-free as humanly possible with this, because I do think the show is legitimately good and it deserves to be viewed. So, if you're so inclined, go check out Better Call Saul. Turn this video off right now, because my paltry words can't do this show justice. So, going into Better Call Saul and my personal experience with it and my overall feelings on it, I'll say this, even though I won't say which show is better, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, I will say that I feel like I have more of a personal connection to Better Call Saul, mainly because Breaking Bad, I jumped into that one pretty late. By the time I started watching Breaking Bad, they were already on season 4 of 5, and I was always playing catch-up, and Breaking Bad is absolutely fantastic, and I loved it, but that one, my experience with that one was more of a binge-watching type of thing, where I was always playing catch-up. Actually, the night of the series finale, I still hadn't seen Ozymandias or Granite State, and AMC was doing kind of a marathon thing, so I watched all 3 episodes in a row to get myself caught up. So I was still getting caught up on the day of the finale, so that tells you how I was with Breaking Bad. But Better Call Saul, I got into that one from the very beginning. I gave it a chance. At first, I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. We're going to do a show about Saul Goodman, the goofy, crooked lawyer character played by Bob Odenkirk from Breaking Bad. Very popular character, but he was more of like a peripheral side character to add a little bit of flavor to the larger world of Breaking Bad. So doing an entire show about him, I was kind of like, well, he's an entertaining character. Let's see how it goes. And from the very first episode, I was like, I think I made the right choice. I think the show's going to turn out pretty well. And boy, I was right. Here we are, like I said, 6 seasons later with the show wrapping up with a finale that I thought was absolutely wonderful. My understanding is the finale is getting kind of a mixed reaction. Some people wanted certain things from it, from the ending. And personally, I think it ended exactly how it needed to and was completely satisfactory, at least for me. So, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible here. So maybe I'll do a spoiler-filled video at another time. But for right now, go watch the show and decide for yourself in terms of whether or not you think that the story ended in the satisfactory place. One thing I will say is that in Breaking Bad, I feel like the true finale to Breaking Bad was Ozymandias, because that felt like that was where everything was really building to. And the last 2 episodes of the show are pretty much just like an extended epilogue that works very, very well, and it's satisfactory, but I feel like the true finale is Ozymandias. Better Call Saul, I think you can almost kind of make a similar stance where the true finale is fun and games, and then the last few episodes is just an epilogue, not just to Better Call Saul, but to Breaking Bad as well in the entire universe. So a very similar setup in that regard, but as far as comparing the two shows, Breaking Bad was obviously more of a crime drama and more of a an inside look into the drug cartel and an exploration of how a man can go bad and all the other things that are brought up with Breaking Bad. But Better Call Saul is a little bit more mundane in its approach, and that's one of the things I love about it, where it has more of a skew towards comedy, which fits the Saul Goodman character. And but it's also, at the end of the day, the show is largely about people going to work and going about their daily lives. One of the things that really impressed me about the show is that it didn't rely a whole lot on sex, drugs, fantasy or sci-fi elements. It didn't rely on even the stuff that made Breaking Bad successful, like the violence and the idea that anybody could be killed off at any moment. It didn't rely on any of that stuff. It was a very kind of hard look at people's daily lives, and in that presentation, you get to see how, like, the everyday issues of going to work and trying to find your place in the world can affect a person, how people can change over time, and how certain elements in their personal lives can affect their work, and how those things can shape their characters long term. And even though it's, on the surface, it is very low-key and mundane, it's immensely gripping and sorry, I've got construction going on upstairs, so I don't know if you can hear all the drills and everything, but it's very satisfying, very engaging, and enthralling. Like, I was hooked on this show from the very beginning, and I just fell in love with it and all the characters in the world. And obviously, the centerpiece of the story is Saul Goodman, who we learn, this can be deferred from Breaking Bad to the surprise of no one. Saul Goodman, not his real name. He was actually Jimmy McGill, who is an up-and-coming lawyer and a brother to a very successful, well-respected lawyer, Chuck McGill, who is dealing with a personal illness that is keeping him from work, and Jimmy's working to develop his own practice, but also take care of his older brother, who got him out of a jam, as we find out later in the show. And as things develop over the course of the show, we actually find out that the relationship between the two brothers is not ideal, and it ends up being one of the biggest sibling rivalries in the history of fiction, and it works out flawlessly as their two massive viewpoints come at odds with each other, where Saul Goodman is this constant, or I should say Jimmy McGill. He slowly becomes Saul Goodman over the course of the series, but I should say Jimmy McGill is this constant, game show host, used car salesman, performing artist, that's a lawyer, and Chuck McGill is a by-the-book, straight-laced, the law is the law, and doesn't appreciate his brother's antics most of the times. And those two viewpoints come at the cost of their relationship, honestly, as they butt heads more and more as the series progresses. And in the mix, you get Kim Wexler, who is... and let me talk about the cast real quick, because I want to say this. Bob Odenkirk, absolutely wonderful in the show. He was great in Breaking Bad, and here he gets to spread his wings and do even more. And there's a scene in one of the last episodes, the penultimate episode, actually, where it's very tense, very dramatic. And I'm looking at the scene, and he's doing it with a almost 90-year-old Carol Burnett, who's also known as a comedian. And these two comedians... they had one of the most tense and dramatic scenes I've ever seen in television. So Bob Odenkirk really got to spread his wings and really got to show what he could do and show his range as a performer throughout the course of the show. And he was absolutely stellar. You get Michael McKean, who I remember going all the way back. He was Lenny from... Laverne and Shirley, Lenny and Squiggy. Hello. That whole thing. The line I always remember from Lenny is, Kosnowski's a pretty good name. It means, help, there's a hog in my kitchen. And he was, also, he was in Clue. He was Mr. Green in that movie. He was probably the best thing he ever did was Spinal Tap. He was fantastic in that movie. And he's been a consistent performance in entertainment all the way through most of my life, and even before I was even born, with things like Laverne and Shirley. And he is also outstanding in the show as Chuck, because as the audience, we're constantly torn between, like, we don't want Jimmy to do the wrong thing, but Chuck is kind of a swarmy, not very likable character, and it's easy to see why Jimmy and him would butt heads, because Chuck is he can rub people the wrong way very easily with his straight-laced, almost condescending nature, and it's kind of easy to be on Jimmy's side, even when you know Chuck is right. And I think that's very true to real life, where it's like sometimes whether or not you like a person determines whether or not you think they're right or wrong, and that's not the way it should be necessarily, but I guess that's just how humans are in that regard. But Michael McKean was great. I thought Patrick Fabian as Howard Hamlin, who's Chuck's partner and associate in the law firm that they run, who on the surface is a very condescending, kind of swarmy kind of guy, but throughout the course of the show, he turns out to be the most honorable character in the entire show. He's just the poor sap that got caught in the middle of the worst sibling rivalry since Cain and Abel, and the poor guy had to suffer big time, shall we say. Again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible, but he ends up being a pretty big victim in the course of it. When on the surface you think he's going to be the most unlikable character, he actually ends up being the most honorable. But the show's secret weapon and the big casting coup of this entire thing was Rhea Seehorn as Kim Wexler, who ends up marrying Jimmy. They have a romantic relationship over the course of the show, and it's actually the core relationship of the entire series that keeps it running. And their trials and tribulations throughout the show just kept going up and down and up and down, and I was hooked on that all the way through. And I think Seahorn's performance, especially with her facial expressions, she can sell big moments just through like her just through her facial expressions. Again, like the season 4 finale, there's a moment where Jimmy does something, and she sold that moment entirely just through the way she was looking at him. And I thought she was, I called her the secret weapon, because she was kind of the one that was like, we know Bob Odenkirk's great and he knows this character inside and out. We know Michael McKean can go and it is very good, but she was kind of I don't want to say an unknown, but I was like, let's see how she fits into this world. And she ended up being a irreplaceable part of it by the end of the show, to the point where she was really the second lead behind Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill. And her ultimate fate and where she ends up by the end of the show was something that I was looking forward to almost from the very beginning. And she was kind of like, she made the show more interesting in that regard, because one of the issues with prequels, and Better Call Saul runs into this a little bit, not too much, but it runs into a little bit, where part of the problems with prequels is that dramatically there are certain things that have to happen and there are certain things that can't happen. So we know that Jimmy can't die. We know that Gus can't die. We know that Mike can't die because they need to be in Breaking Bad. And it's hard to kind of get around that and make that stuff exciting and interesting when we know certain characters can't die. But Kim is not in Breaking Bad, so her fate and her story is a solid hook for Better Call Saul to keep us going, because we want to know what happens to her and how she ends up, along with Jimmy and Chuck and everybody else. But Rhea Seehorn was absolute perfect casting. I thought she was great in the show. And again, largely just through facial expressions, because as a fellow lawyer who's riding the line between kind of like Chuck's stance of like the law is the law and you got to uphold the high standards of the profession and the law at large, and the more fun and carefree lifestyle of a Jimmy McGill, who she gets romantically interested and attached to, she's constantly torn between those two viewpoints. And at one point it feels like Jimmy's kind of pulling her to the dark side almost, and making her someone that's going to get involved in all of the really, really shady stuff that Saul Goodman gets into during the events of Breaking Bad. But since she's not there for Breaking Bad, we're wondering, it's like, is this where things go too far? And you think, for years people were speculating, oh, is she going to die or what? And so her journey was a fun one to follow all the way throughout the course of the show, in addition to Jimmy McGill's and his transformation into Saul Goodman. And I've talked about Better Call Saul as a prequel, but actually like I said earlier, it's kind of both a prequel and a sequel, because it fills in certain gaps of how Saul Goodman ended up following the events of Breaking Bad. And every season would start off with the black and white Gene scene with his new identity, showing what his current life is like post Breaking Bad. And those gaps get filled in little by little over the course of the series until the Gene plot basically takes over the last, I would say, 3 episodes or so of Better Call Saul. And the payoff to that story is also fantastic, and I loved it. But God, there's so much to talk about with the show, and again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible. But Better Call Saul, absolutely terrific show. And I talk about the cast, but the returning cast members from Breaking Bad, like Mike and Gus, and those characters were also fantastic. And there are those nostalgic goodies for the Breaking Bad fans, especially towards the end. But I think that those, rather than just being shameless member berries moments, I think a lot of them really work and help service the character of Jimmy McGill / Saul Goodman. There's a scene, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say this, but there is a scene with Walt in the finale that's a flashback that is, I thought was terrific, and had a line in there that like cut like a knife. Ultimately, when you look at the show as a whole, like what the show's largely about is the battle for Jimmy McGill's soul, and whether or not a person can be redeemed and saved, no matter how far they go, and how far is too far before somebody can be pulled back into the light. And I felt like the finale addressed that, and I feel like the finale paid it off exactly how I kind of wanted it to go. And it worked. I do have one issue with the finale, and it's a minor thing at the very end where they kind of stretch believability a little bit, but it led to a nice moment, so I'm going to let it slide. Again, I don't want to spoil what it is, but overall, Better Call Saul is a near perfect show, near perfectly directed, near perfectly acted, and just wonderful from start to finish. And I can't wait to go back, because I'm going to watch Breaking Bad again, and I'm going to watch this show again at some point. And like I said, because I watched this show from start to finish, I feel like I have more of a personal attachment to it than Breaking Bad, because I was there from the very beginning, and I watched it all the way to the end. And credit to everybody involved, Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould and everybody involved in making the show, because this last season was not an easy one to make, because there were delays thanks to the lockdowns in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There was also a health scare with Bob Odenkirk, who had a heart attack on set. while they were, I believe, halfway through filming the final season. And I'm sure that created a lot of issues. And you think, oh my God, the star of the show is having a major health scare here. And it seems like Bob's okay now, but it was very scary when the news broke. Not because, it's like, oh no, what's going to happen to the show, but more like, I hope this dude's okay. Because he seems like a really good dude, but seems like he's okay now, and we got the final season to Better Call Saul, which is really good. It was kind of like, if things had really, really gone south with that, we would have probably gotten a House of Cards situation where you get the last season without the guy that made the show. Now, granted, House of Cards lost its main guy because the main guy turned out to be a super sexual predator creep and a bit of a weirdo, and kind of that show going south, I can blame entirely on him because it's his own degeneracy is what ruined House of Cards, unfortunately, and it left the rest of the cast and crew there to kind of pick up the pieces and try to make it work. But in any case, Better Call Saul, terrific show. I loved it. I plan on doing a video summarizing the movies and TV shows that I've watched throughout the year and doing one big massive review of all of them, but I wanted to spend a little bit of special attention on Better Call Saul because I legitimately love the show and I am praising it to the high heavens. So if you have not watched Better Call Saul, I highly recommend you do so. If you like Breaking Bad, I think you'll like Better Call Saul. Most people seem to. Again, it is a different show from Breaking Bad, and really what it is, it's like you get this mundane, almost workplace drama / comedy with the elements of the rise of the drug cartel and Gus's group and all that stuff kind of slowly creeping in over the course of 6 seasons until you get to the mid-season finale of season 6 where those two worlds intersect in a very deadly way, shall we say. So it's kind of like it is more of its own thing, but the show slowly becomes Breaking Bad over time because it has to transition into that series. And when the two worlds intersect, it has dire consequences for most of the characters. Now, one lingering question that I have about Better Call Saul, I actually posted this on my Twitter as well, and this is something I'll be thinking about in regards to the show possibly forever and probably will not have a definitive answer to. In regards to the creation of Saul Goodman and Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman, did that happen because Chuck always assumed the worst of him and his lack of belief in Jimmy pushed him in that direction? Or was he right about Jimmy the entire time and Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman was something that was inevitable? I guess we'll never know, and it's something to think about, and something I've kind of gone back and forth on when thinking about and discussing the show, but it is fun to think about. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Better Call Saul. I think the show is fantastic. I love it. It's great. I'm definitely going to rewatch it. So those are my personal recommendations. I think Better Call Saul is great. I think the finale stuck the landing, and I am overall very happy with it. So that is all I have for you in this video. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow the link down below. And if you want more from this channel, if you want to see more from this channel, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new content, and be on the lookout for more because I've got a few videos lined up, mostly wrestling related, but you know, this channel is predominantly a wrestling focused channel, but that's how good Better Call Saul is. I got to break out of my normal pattern to really talk about it because I just love the show so much. But yeah, once again, thank you everybody for watching. Y'all have a nice day, and I will see you all later.